Rachel Easton here from Harbor Wild Watch, and I am at Minter Creek. I'm just outside of the fish hatchery, and we're gonna look for some salmon in the creek here. So let me flip it around so I can show you what we've got here. It is a gorgeous fall day. The big leaf maples are starting to turn color and drop their leaves into the creek, which is making it take on a tea colored, full of tannins. And it's kind of interesting, this creek changes quite a bit year to year based on what trees are falling, and we've got a landslide from last year that has impacted the creek a little bit, causing it to change and move around. And as we look down, just kind of right here, there is a new little ladder, a little log that's gone all the way across the creek that'll cause the fish to have to jump. And chum salmon are not spectacular jumpers, but they can manage a few feet here and there, which is really kind of cool. And you always can tell when there's beginning to be sort of salmon season when there are cars parked along the road, and you can see there's a couple of people fishing in the creek. This is a hatchery. This is the state-run salmon hatchery, and they do several different species. But for right now, we are in the season of chum salmon, which are one of the later spawning species. And they come in sort of November and December. Minter Creek is one of the earlier creeks that sees fish. Donkey Creek, which is close to Harbor Wild Watch, is going to have fish closer to mid-November. So we just like to take a peek and see if there's any fish to be seen. You can see there's water's closed up by close to the hatchery, and that's where all the fish are going to kind of congregate and gather together. Right now you can see those gates are kind of closed up there to prevent the salmon from going straight up the stream, and they get diverted off to the left-hand side where the fish ladder takes them into the hatchery. So these are hatchery fish here, and we'll hope to see some. It's a little early, and a lot of their movement upstream depends on the timing of the tides, because when it's high tide, it's much easier to kind of make their way upstream. But this is an excellent spot for fish viewing. You can see it's quite calm down here at this lower section of the creek, and you can walk almost all the way out to the mouth where it empties into the salt water. And right now there's not very many fish to be seen, but that's all going to change here in a couple of weeks when we will see thousands of fish. So it's always kind of fun to see the timing of it all. I like to time it by the big leaf maples. So these large maple trees are about the largest deciduous tree that we have, and they're going to shed their leaves and their seed pods right now, and they end up in the creek. And by the time those trees have lost most of their leaves is when we will see the majority of the chum salmon coming through. The thing I don't like to see, though, is this plant right here. This is Japanese knotweed, and it's an incredibly invasive species that really loves these riparian areas, these places where the stream banks are really, really wet. And it is an edible species, and a lot of people will actively seek it out to forage and consume it as a sort of their way of helping control this invasive species. It is a little bit pretty though in the fall, but one of the reasons why it is disastrous is because it grows so big and tall and has these broad leaves, and it overshadows the native understory plants. And then this one dies back entirely. It loses all the leaves. It stops shading things, and the fish really do need shaded banks. If you look on the opposite bank where there's a lot more native species, you can see that there are plants there, and they're going to stay green throughout the whole season. And the salmon can use that for cover. There's also, bugs that are going to crawl out and fall into the water there. It's habitat for all of the predators that'll eventually feed on the salmon carcasses. But this doesn't really leave much for our native animals. So, haven't seen any fish out. Let's walk a little closer to the mouth, see how far we can get. So you can see there is a bridge down there. That is the roadway, and it's kind of a high bridge, which is great because it doesn't force the creek to flow through it, doesn't change the velocity of the creek at all. All right, let's go check out the creek a little bit. Here's the hatchery, and we can walk up and view the salmon ladder if we want to. And this is where we see the most of the salmon because this is kind of their dead end, and so quite often they will just mill about. Not seeing many now. Oh, I see a couple. So chum salmon are the second largest species of salmon that we have in our Pacific waters after the Chinook salmon. And they make up about 10% of the resident orca's food source. And you can kind of see some kind of just beyond the line. Maybe they know maybe they can read and they're hanging out over there. So salmon are what we refer to as semiparous, meaning that they are going to get one chance to reproduce and then they will die. So males and females will make their way back upstream after spending 3 to 5 years in the ocean, maturing and gathering lots of weight and lots of fats and calories, honestly, to be able to propel themselves upstream. They don't eat on their journey, and so whatever they've acquired is all that they have. When the females select a appropriate spawning bed, they'll dig a red with their tail. So it'll be kind of like this long, long, shallow depression in the gravel. They'll lay their eggs when they've selected a male that kind of suits them. And what's sexy to a female salmon is going to be a large hooked nose, that's called a kype. Big teeth in this species especially. They get called dog salmon because their teeth really do look like canines that you would find on a dog or coyote. And then they also are looking at color changes too. So quite often the Pacific salmon will get a humped back. They will change their colors. Chum salmon are one of the more muted colored salmon. Probably most famous are the sockeye salmon with their red bodies and bright green heads. But chum salmon do take on kind of purple and black splotches along their sides, which are kind of greenish, and they do get a humped back and a very, very large hooked nose called the kype. And that's what the salmon find attractive. Let's walk up and see if we can see more fish a little further along. From above, I've got my polarized filter on, so that should help. And the hatchery is kind of great. They help people to view the salmon as well as educate about the salmon. But hatcheries are not exactly in the best interest of our wild fish. But in a lot of places, we wouldn't have salmon. We would have killed them off by now if we hadn't sort of hijacked their biological systems in order to create hatcheries. A much more effective method of restoring salmon is to restore their salmon habitat, both upstream and in the saltwater. So you can hear the rushing water of this fish ladder, but I'm going to move over here so we can see a little bit better the fish. You can see they're all kind of waiting along that bank there. When the creek is really flowing, water will begin flowing down this spillway here. But right now, most of the water is contained in this little channel right here. And this is, there's maybe 12.5 fish over there, all aiming upstream. And you can see there's a few down in here that are kind of jostling and moving around. That's all showing off, trying to advertise just how fit that they are, that they're gonna make a good choice for a mate. If you guys want to post in the comments where you're watching from, I love to know that information. This is Gig Harbor, Washington. This is Winter Creek out on the Key Peninsula. Oh, there's a cat. I just saw a black cat in the background. The other way to know when the salmon are running is to pay attention to what the predators are doing. And in this case, most of our predators are the human fisher, the people who are here looking to grab a salmon while they're still kind of bright and shiny and the meat is not quite rotten and gross yet. Oh yeah, you guys are from all over the place. Gainesville, Missouri, North Dakota, Canada, California, Texas, Detroit, Port Orchard and Kent, Olalla. Yes, Olalla, you should come by. It's open to the public. You can park either at the hatchery or along the side of the road and you just walk on by. You can walk kind of the outside of the property and then the gate is open during business hours, or you can just walk right in through the main gate. You'll see all the people gathered around. That's your clue that you're getting close to the stream. If you're also local, we have a Chum Salmon Festival coming up November 19th and 20th at Donkey Creek in downtown Gig Harbor, where we'll be kind of welcoming the salmon home with lots of fun activities. They'll have chum burgers offered for sale. They will have some fish face painting and crafts. People will do fish printing, where we take the salmon and actually paint them, and then you can press it onto a t-shirt or a tote bag or whatever you like. But very cool to see this wild migration just right in our urban environment here. These people are fishing beyond the line. That's what we would call mooching or poaching. It's kind of in bad form. The hatchery doesn't want people snagging fish from right up close while they're waiting. You gotta kind of give them a fair shot and catch them while they're coming all the way up. Oh, thanks for everybody who's sharing and liking this feed. I know the volume of it's really loud, so feel free to just turn that down. The water sounds are really can be intense. If you're new to our page, we're Harbor Wild Watch. We do environmental education, and for the most part, our content is marine. But in the fall, there are just terrible low tides. They're at like 5 in the morning, and I'm unwilling to go out. Plus, they're not very low, so it makes education and live streaming really just difficult all around. So we transition and focus on the salmon season. And chum salmon are our late spawning season that we have here in the Pacific Northwest. They come in November. So these are some of the earliest. If I come back here in 3 weeks, you will not be able to see the bottom of this stream bed right here because it will be just so full with fish. And this is a hatchery. And so these fish are sort of artificially here because of all of this massive equipment and things like that. But before there was a hatchery here, there were salmon in the stream. In fact, almost every stream within Western Washington had salmon at some point. Various different species that spawn at different times or different locations, and so they're kind of all timed. Chum salmon are the shortest spawning season, or shortest spawning salmon, and so they're going to make their way up less than about 5 miles from the saltwater. So no gigantic arduous journey like the sockeyes or the Chinooks have, but this species means it's more accessible. We have a lot of small streams in Western Washington that these fish can take advantage of. We are on the 47th parallel here. Yeah, the salmon in the classroom program is one that I'm really a fan of, because when you watch little fish in your school go from an egg to an alvin to a tiny little fry about the size of a pine needle. And then you get to feed them and watch them grow up a little bit before releasing them into the creek. It really can make an impression upon you, just how fragile these little animals are and how incredible it is that they go out to the big open ocean, they get large, and they come back. So we participate in that program as well, and I coordinate a lot of field trips for our local schools where they can go release their baby salmon. I'm also sort of on call for aquarist help for how to manage those tanks in captivity, and I'm working with Tacoma Public Schools for a program to help them raise baby salmon too. It's super fun. I always ask the kids to name their fish because each kid gets like 2 or 3 to release. And I say, all right, you got to think of a name while we're on our way over. And then when you dip them into the water, you say, you know, farewell, Susie and Solomon. And usually S names are very popular. You know, Sally, Salmon. It's pretty great. So chum salmon, if you are a salmon connoisseur, a lot of folks will say that chum salmon is kind of mushier meat, but I've done some taste tests with people who claimed they could tell the difference, and we prepared king salmon and chum salmon and pink salmon all the same, and they couldn't tell the difference at all. So I think it's more of a snobbery thing that, oh, it's easier to get chum, so they're obviously not as good. For sport fishing, they do really move, and they can put up a pretty good fight. Yeah, most people end up smoking chum, and it makes incredible smoked salmon. I don't really enjoy the taste of salmon, which is so weird because I come from a fishing family. I've fished my whole life, but I just don't really care to eat it. I think I'd like to appreciate the fish more doing their wild thing, and being able to teach about them is more my jam than eating them. Once they hit in the fresh water, no, they do not really hit much. They stop eating when they make the transition. As soon as their colors start to change and they enter the freshwater systems, they're not eating anymore. Their digestive systems actually wither away to almost nothing. Like if you dissect a spawned out salmon, you won't be able to find their stomach or their intestines because they just shrivel. And that's to make room for their gametes. So the females will swell with eggs and the males with sperm, and that's their main motivation for going upstream. Salmon are semiparous, meaning that they die after spawning. And a lot of other animals do this as well. Like octopus are one species that once the females have raised their eggs, they die, which is really quite sad. With salmon, what's kind of very poetic about it is that they enrich the entire surrounding environment, and that gives their offspring the best chance of survival. So these fish are bringing nutrients from the marine environment all the way up into very nutrient poor systems far from the oceans. And then as they die, their carcasses, degrade and decompose, and all those nutrients are deposited then far upstream. And that fertilizes the trees and plant life. It feeds the large predators like bears, cougars, wolves, coyotes, raccoons, even like possums, and even ducks, like mallard ducks will eat chum salmon carcasses. And that helps ensure the survival of all the rest of those species. So it's really a great kind of system for bringing marine nutrients far from the oceans. Professional sport fishermen allergic to seafood. Oh, that's so sad. I mean, I don't really eat seafood, but mostly it's just because I just appreciate it so much. I like it alive. I'd rather see it in the stream than on my plate. But I do understand the appeal. My family are big into crabbing, and I have to get my crab license every single year. Speaking of crabs, I've got my kelp crab earrings on today because, I wasn't planning to come to the salmon stream. I was going to go to the office. Yeah, super fun. And I always have to get my crab license. I'm a certified crab wrangler. I made the certification myself, so I don't know if that really counts, but My family really does appreciate that I can go get my limit of crab each day when we're out at the beach during crabbing season. All right, but back to fish. Let's head back down to the mouth and see if we can catch any fish kind of coming up the river. And we'll see what we can see. Oh, that's a fence. Hold on. Sometimes you gotta look up. So we work with the hatchery a little bit. They are very cooperative with our organization. They help participate in our field trips, and a lot of the staff are super knowledgeable about fish on a level that I just am not. I'm more of a generalist biologist or marine focused and invertebrate focused especially. And so I really do appreciate the knowledge that comes from these hatchery folks. This is my favorite part of when they put in this hatchery, they rolled the chain link fence down, and it's great because you can walk on this and not slide. Ooh, so here's that. I'm gonna just pop down here to show this new log. So we do have a jumping spot for our fish that will kind of wait in that pool and then be able to make the jump and head upstream. So this will be a great spot to view. I'm gonna try to come back several times over the next few weeks. My kids' school is just like a block from here, so I get to come here often, and whenever it's not raining, I like to stop. Okay, let's see. Let's head back. You can tell the fish are not here in huge numbers because there's only a handful of people fishing. But when the salmon are really running up high, we'll get, hundreds of people lining the banks, all of them going after what they can. And I've got my polarized lens on right now, which is a big help. If you're viewing salmon, I highly recommend getting some polarized sunglasses or a polarized lens. So here's the glare that we would experience without that polarized filter, and it's just this little clip-on that sits over my lens, but it really does cut the glare. And then I do have to make sure that if I twist it, I can get, okay, there's the full glare, and then if I twist it and kind of bend it, make sure the light only enters one direction, then I get really good clear views of salmon. Again, if you're wanting to put in the comments where you're from, I'd love to know that information. This is Minter Creek in Gig Harbor, Washington, and it is sort of a short salmon stream, and we're seeing chum salmon making their way up as a part of their end-of-life migration to get to spawning grounds. I always like to look at these little backwater eddies to see if I can find carcasses, and sure enough, there's a few. Whenever you find the carcasses, that means that the fish are spawning out. If you see a filleted carcass, of course, that means it was a person who got to it. But we do often see a lot of predators that are attracted to this area. I love the people have, there's been a lot of erosion at this little kind of side seep stream that flows through here. And so people have put in a way across. It didn't used to be like that. It used to just be, you'd fall on your butt. So if you do come, parking along the side of the road is great. Just don't be an idiot. Go really slowly when you're crossing the street. It's kind of a blind corner in both directions, so do be careful. But you can come up on this side, and there's access to sort of the floodplain area. It's a really popular place for people to fish. It's a little hard to access, and it is very muddy over there. I have fallen in up to my knees many, many times, but here from the bridge, we can really see what's happening in the stream. And here's just another view of why that polarized lens makes a difference. So this is the non-polarized view. And if I turn that, then you can see into the water. And that's actually better than my actual eyes. I don't have my polarized sunglasses on today, so I'm actually looking through my phone to see it. Now there's a couple of ways down. This way has been really eroded and is very, very soupy and slippery. Someone has tied a rope though, so I feel like I can navigate down without falling. And if I do fall, well then we'll have a really fun live stream. I have fallen on camera before. You guys really liked it. So if you come, this is the floodplain. So when we have a really high tide, this actually will inundate with salt water, and all of this will be kind of covered up. But right now it's nice low tide, so we can see. Oh, hey, we've got there's some eggs sitting here. It's really hard to focus. Sorry. So people are catching fish. Yeah, so this right here is the soupy mess. The plants do help, but they die back this time of year, and then you're just left with mud. So I try to step where I see footprints that are not too deep. So this creek supports a handful of species. There are coho salmon here, as well as king salmon, and then chum. But the coho and the chinook are finished spawning for the year, and what we have left is the chum salmon, the latest spawning of all the salmon species. And you can see it's a pretty shallow stream, which makes for very dramatic splashing when the fish actually decide to make their way up. So sometimes they stick to the deeper channels, but those deeper channels, you know, there's logs and there's waterfalls, small ones that they have to jump up. So quite often the fish will just come right up through this little shallow section. This is a great place for viewing all kinds of wildlife. I really enjoy watching the birds and things that are out taking advantage of the rich source of protein and calories that comes up. And so it's a great place to watch heron and eagles and osprey. So we've got some more signs of fish. Got some fish vertebra here. So salmon are bony fishes, Osteichthyes classification, and they do have this bony skeleton. They also have cartilaginous parts as well. So the fins, the fin rays, and then kind of their gills. Not really the whole gills, but there is some cartilage there as well for support. And we quite often will find that. I always like to look at the footprints and see who's been around. Is it mostly human footprints, or are there any predators? Because this is prime habitat for that. So this whole section will flood on a high tide, and it's kind of interesting because sometimes you'll get fish that like migrate up a little side channel that doesn't connect to anything, and they can get kind of caught in one place. It looks like something official is happening over there. Homeowners probably trying to prevent erosion on that side bank, which is definitely a losing battle when you have moving, flowing water. So if you get an opportunity to view salmon, there is a bit of salmon viewing etiquette that is good to keep in mind. You want to stay out of the creek as much as possible. One, because you'll spook fish and it might cause them to exert extra energy that hampers their ability to get upstream. Be like if you're trying to run a race and somebody puts a big obstacle in your way, you're going to have to go around it and spend more energy. You might not finish that race. Two, it's always a good idea to be kind of moving slowly, no big movements. I find I have more success viewing fish when I have muted colors on, when I kind of dress like the environment. I'm not saying you have to go full camo. I'm not sure how good salmon's vision is, but you know, maybe bright fluorescent hunter's orange is not the best. And then just kind of move slowly and quietly. You never want to throw rocks or anything like that that's going to harass the fish. That's really in poor form. And then, of course, if you're fishing, you want to be mindful of other people who are fishing too. And of course, obey any rules and regulations that your state might have. Yeah, we do get deer that will come down to the creek side, and I've even seen them like licking a salmon carcass, and I think it was for salt. Would be my guess anyway. I don't think they're actually consuming the fish, just mostly kind of licking it, getting some of those marine minerals. But here's a good look at some salmon bones, and you can see the rib bones are really thin in fish because they're more for support and less for protection. So like in a human, your ribs are for protecting your lungs, and so they're really reinforced and strong, whereas the ribs in fish are not. They don't have lungs to protect. You can see the tail end over here with this bit of cartilage in the fin rays. Got another one here. But yeah, multiple vertebra all the way along. Very cool. Here's an animal footprint right here. These are river otter. You can tell by the soft little rounded toes. So river otters are a really common creekside predator. We get a lot of them. And they will stay in family groups, which is kind of fun. I was trying to find more of those prints, but I really only see these two little paws. So cute. Yeah, it's all, if you're a biologist, you kind of become a bit of a detective. You're trying to figure out what's been here, what's changing, what's shifting. Lots of leaves piling up because it is, of course, fall, and all of that is leaching tannins into the creek, which makes it kind of dark brown and tea colored. The salmon actually will imprint on the exact smell of this location and pay attention to the magnetic field and sort of the map of this location so they can find their way back. It's not 100% though. Salmon do spawn in other locations other than their home streams. They might go the next stream over or kind of get swept up with other fish that are migrating to a different stream. But pretty much they're going to find their way back. Let's see what else we can see. All of the woody debris here, you would think would be an impediment to the salmon, and it is. Technically, it's an obstacle that they have to go around or under or over, but it all helps to slow down the stream and actually makes it significantly easier for fish passage. If you have woody debris that's removed from a stream, the fish don't fare as well. Here's a chunk of eggs. That's what that bright orange is. So a lot of folks actually will save the eggs and use them for fishing other species. There's a number of fish that really enjoy salmon eggs. There's a lot of bird activity too. There's a couple robins and wrens. I saw a cute little ruby-crowned kinglet a moment ago. That's the hard part. The camera only shows so much. I was hoping this clump of eggs would drift a little closer so we could examine it, but I think we can walk over to that other clump up there. That's the hard part. Getting up the muddy bank. Okay, that was pretty painless. I'm always afraid I'm going to just eat it on a live stream. I have some good video of past experiences where I have miscalculated and ended up in the drink. So maybe I'll post those now that we're kind of into salmon season. We're getting ready for some salmon field trips for students who will be visiting our local creeks. And so if you know of a school teacher who's local to the Gig Harbor area, we do offer those field trips for free for public schools for a very small fee for private schools. All right, let's go down, and I can see that there are no fish in this immediate area right now, so if I walk down, climb down? Okay, we'll just go the long way. Don't fall. I still have to go to the office after this, so I can't totally jump in. But let's go investigate these eggs, just so I can show you. A lot of folks have not seen salmon eggs before. And it's a great teachable moment. So I move really slow in the creek. I'm not trying to stir up a bunch of gravel or cause any erosion that's gonna make it more difficult for fish to make their way upstream. But these are salmon eggs. So this is kind of one ovary. They have two, and so there'll be sort of two big packets of eggs. And this is from a smaller fish that probably only has maybe 2,000 or 3,000 eggs total. You can see the blood supply in here. This is actually really kind of a fascinating view of how these eggs are nourished. So your average, like a full-grown, really big chum salmon might have 3,000 to 5,000 eggs within her. And the eggs just take up so much space that they stop eating and their digestive system really withers away to nothing. So someone caught the fish that was carrying this eggs and just probably filleted it here creekside and left the eggs behind as a food for anybody else who's passing by. The eggs are really highly sought after. This is where most of the calories are in salmon. This is what bears will eat when there's a lot of fish coming up. The bears will just selectively just tear out the abdomens and chomp the eggs and then move on to the next, because this is really a big source of calories. Yeah, I'm surprised. It's probably from this morning because it should be totally gobbled up by now. Sorry if this grosses anybody out, but I find it fascinating. And that beautiful red color is in part because of what salmon are eating. So their entire insides, the flesh turns this beautiful bright red color because they are eating a lot of krill, which have these carotenoid pigments within them. So it's very much the same as flamingos turning pink from eating brine shrimp, which also have carotenoids that stain their colors. So these eggs are not viable any longer. So they won't survive or anything like that. It's not like I can just chuck them in the water and they'll get fertilized and survive. They are done for, but they will make a really great meal for somebody. From either birds to otters, raccoons. People actually do eat them as well. Let's check out over here. So I mentioned before that I have a polarized lens on my camera that really helps to be able to see down in and cuts through the glare. The salmon days are really overcast. It's very good salmon weather, we call it, when it's rainy and gray all the time. And so having this filter really does help. And I can show you by twisting it what it really looks like. So this is what my eye sees, is a lot of glare. And then if we adjust the lens, then we can cut through that glare and see through the water a lot easier. So this far channel is one that fish often will swim in because it's a little bit deeper. There's a little bit more cover, but they like to usually come up with the high tide because it makes it easier. So on the king tide, when we have really, really high water, it will flood this entire floodplain with water, and then it makes really easy fish passage. This is Minter Creek in Gig Harbor, Washington. And this little island that I'm on right now does get covered with water as well. So fish will make their way all the way along. Yeah, krill is a really, really common food source in the open ocean for a lot of animals, not just salmon, but large whales. The largest whales in the world eat krill. Blue whales. Most of the filter feeding whales do. Gray whales will eat some krill, but they also can bottom feed, taking in little shrimp called ghost shrimp. There's this little tiny tributary over here that I always like to check out, this little outpouring that comes from the park on the other side. But yeah, look at this just beautiful prime salmon habitat. So it's really great to see a very healthy ecosystem. All right, friends, I should wrap it up and get back to the office. I got to prepare for some field trips, but I appreciate all of you tuning in with us and learning and asking questions and sharing where you're from. I just love to know that information. It's always really fun for me. Okay, I have to move my polarized lens off of my phone so that you can actually see me on the front camera. But hi, I'm Rachel. I am the education director for Harbor Wild Watch. We would love it if you would follow our organization on all of our social media channels. We're on Facebook and YouTube and Instagram. So if you're not following us there already, please do. That does support our organization. Your clicks matter and your comments and shares do as well. So I appreciate all of you who have shared this live stream today. And I hope that we can bring you more salmon content, hopefully some more fish in the coming weeks as our salmon season really ramps up. But stay tuned. And then it's nighttime, tide pooling season. So I'll be out doing live streams from beaches at night. It's very fun. It's one of the best parts of my job. It's miserable and cold and wet and rainy and awful, but it's great because we get to see cool animals that are out. So thanks everybody for tuning in, and we'll see you again streamside soon.